I'm so happy to be with you all today, and what an amazing day. Congratulations, Arts Fort Worth. Bob, Madam Mayor, for your leadership here and great remarks. We've got such a good story to talk about, and that is the work that we do. Nationally, 76% of the American public, three-quarters of Americans say arts and culture is personally important to me, yet just 50% of the American public says everyone in my community has the opportunity to engage and participate in the arts. 92% of all Americans say every student grades pre-K through 12 should be receiving a quality arts education. Barely more than half the population says everyone in my community, all the kids in my community, barely half have the opportunity for enough arts events or enough classes in the arts. And everyone's mileage differs and every community is different, but, that's some of the gap, what we've got to fill. And the public gets and understands a lot of the incredible work that we do. And I can tell you right here in Fort Worth, 92% of attendees to arts events say this event, this venue is a source of pride and community identity. The public gets that. But we've got a job to do because, as you heard, we've got to tell our story and show the data behind it, and we've got to be relentless messengers about how we're building a healthier Fort Worth through the arts, a stronger, a more vibrant, a more prosperous for everyone Fort Worth through the arts. So, I'm going to kind of jump right to some of the pragmatic aspects of the arts. Obviously, we can stipulate, and we've heard some of the great session. We all love the arts. They inspire us. They beautify the communities. They bring us joy. They connect us intergenerationally and so many things. But the fact is, for example, arts are good for the economy. Arts are an industry, supports jobs, generates government revenue. And so we're going to start by talking about some of these economic aspects of the arts, and then we'll touch on some of the other community building benefits that the arts bring as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, the economic impact of nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences right here in Fort Worth. And I'll give you some data in a sec, but just a little bit about the study. We did it, and we analyzed 2022. Oh my gosh, remember what we were doing in 2022? That whole pandemic thing, and we were all trying to claw our way out of this and wondering, what's going to happen to our organization? The pandemic was just devastating for the arts in America. Nationally, 99% of arts and culture organizations who present, who have performances or exhibitions, effectively all of them had to either cancel programming, suspend operations, close. Many organizations never reopened. Johns Hopkins University actually tracks employment at all nonprofits nationally. So nationally, there's about 1.6 million nonprofits. About 110,000 of those are arts nonprofits. Arts nonprofits lost jobs at 5 times the rate of all nonprofits. And the data suggests still trying to work our way back from some of that as well. Lastly, finally, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, top economic shop on the planet, they did their big analysis, how bad was the pandemic on the nation's economy? And we all felt it. Tourism, lodging was hit hard, airlines, but they called out the arts, and especially the performing arts, as among the most impacted industries. So challenging times, that's the year we captured. So when we do this study again, things are going to be so much better. Not every era was pointing downward, though, interestingly enough, during the pandemic. There was one that was crazy upward, and that was personal creation of the arts. 37% of the American public, more than 1/3, said, Yeah, I tried some kind of new arts, music, craft, culinary, creative, expressive, experience during the arts. And, you foreshadowed with ukulele. Amazon was actually writing these articles about this mysterious spike in ukulele sales. What was going on with that? So, how many loaves of sourdough bread did we all eat, off our doorstep? I ate them all, and keep sending them. I like it. But did anybody try anything new? Any new arts or craft form during the pandemic? Yeah. What'd you try? Just woodworking. Excellent. Someone over there. All right. Fiber arts. Me too. Yeah. Knitting. All right, so this is the perfect lead-in. I actually learned how to knit too during the pandemic. I'd always wanted to. My grandmother, my aunts, they all knit. Love that clickety-clack of the needles. And, and wherever the knitting was, that was the most interesting conversation as a kid. Like, that's what happened to Uncle Al, So, so anyway, but I got to tell you, after I watched everything on Netflix and Hulu. I didn't want to get off the couch, but I knew I had to do something else. And so, I ordered my knitting supplies and kind of went online, and a neighbor sort of really helped me do it. And I'm not that good. I make the world's longest scarves, But you can't be knitting and at the same time stressing about the pandemic and is there going to be a place for me on the other side of this, when this is over. So, and in fact, I was part of an international, Americans for the Arts was part of a big international research study looking at the impact of arts and creativity and during the pandemic on mental health. And we did it. It was an international study with University College London, University of Florida. Short story, and this was tens of thousands of people who did these weekly surveys for us. Thank you. People who spend a half hour a day going to the arts, attending something, making, watching, any kind of creative, expressive type of experience, lower depression, lower rates of anxiety, higher rates of life satisfaction. Remember the loneliness, remember the isolation going on back then. And there was the arts, like in so many ways, improving us as individuals, our lives, as well as communities. So, of course, it was finally time to, get out of the house, right? Remember, it was like, all right, it's time, Randy wants out. So, my wife and I am in the D.C. area, and we thought, okay, let's find something to go to. We thought a museum seemed like a good first kind of experience. And there's in Washington, D.C., there's a wonderful textile museum in Washington, D.C. And now that I'm a fiber artist... Thank you. That's a laugh line. Usually people look at me so seriously. I'm like, I'm not. Remember the long, endless scarves? So, but we thought, well, that's the perfect thing to go to. And so what did we do? We went online and we found their website and they were open and read about a couple of their exhibitions that they had going and thought, perfect, and pulled out the credit card and punched in the numbers and we bought our tickets online. We're all set to go. Saturday comes, jump in the car, we drive downtown, Washington, D.C., park in a parking garage, $10, get my stub from the guy. And from there, on the way to the museum, we stopped and had a meal. Isn't that something we do when we're going to the arts? We make an event out of it. There's a wonderful restaurant downtown, that part of the city, Founding Farmers. I'm seeing some heads nod. Yeah, it's like, it's farm to fork place and really lovely restaurant. Not necessarily an inexpensive one. We spent about $75 on lunch, which, but we were out and it's like, it was special. And then from there, it was about a half dozen block walk to the museum. And we got in and we got our program. And I can tell you my first experience in that museum, it wasn't the awe and wonder of a 1,000-year-old tapestry. They had that. Or an incredible quilt exhibition they had going on. It was the air conditioning, because this was August in Washington, D.C., and it was like, brutal. You know what I'm talking about. Oh my God, I've seen nothing. I already love this place. And so then we spent the afternoon, we heard a talk from a curator, and we saw the different exhibitions and dropped some cash on the way out the door at the gift shop. So pause there a second. Think of all the industries that were touched related to this one Randy finally gets out of the house again after the pandemic. Well, it started earlier in the week when we went online to the museum's website. Arts organizations have websites. Now, we all take that for granted, right? But that means we pay web designers, we've got connectivity fees, and we hire photographers and writers to populate those websites with content. And we bought our tickets online, right? So now you got the finance and the e-commerce folks, they're getting a little bit of the action. We drove downtown, parked in the parking garage. Now, during the week, you can't get a spot. You got to get there like at 5:30 if you want to get in that garage. During the weekend in that part of the city, nothing else going on. If it wasn't for those arts organizations, that parking garage wouldn't even be open. That guy that gave me the ticket stub, that's a job. There's a company that owns and manages those parking garages. Those are businesses. And then off to the lunch. $75. Some of that goes to the growers and producers of the food because everything comes from within 50 miles. The waiter's bringing home some personal income. The owner, some entrepreneurial income. And then we got to the museum. And I'm sure, if you run a facility here, how insane your utility bill is in the summer, keeping your attendees cool and comfortable. So like all businesses, we pay utility bills. We get a program. You ever notice when you go to an arts event, you're always getting a program. There is somebody who writes that, a graphic artist who designs it. Printers make bank off the arts. So all of those industries. And then arts organizations, they employ more than just the curator, or the performers that you might see, because they've also got plumbers and electricians, and we've all got legal services, and we've got accountants and auditors and security staff. Our organizations support a whole range of industries in the community, and we leverage all that event-related spending because, again, we're going out and we're having an event. So that's what we're after with this whole arts and economic prosperity study, looking at the economic impact of arts and culture organizations and the event-related spending by their audiences. That make sense? All right, so what did we do? Well, so Fort Worth was one of 373 communities across the country. Everybody catch that technical effect? That was all me, thank you. We were in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. We studied communities as small as 4,000, as large as 4 million. If the arts are happening in your community, economic impact is happening there as well. And that's a story that we've got to tell. All right, real quick, a little bit about the study, just a couple things. You heard me mention nonprofit a couple times. We focus on this study on nonprofit arts and culture organizations. That might also include a municipally owned cultural facility. It might be, one of the, love all the programs at the library here. My wife's a librarian. I'm gonna have to go home and deliver the news. So, we don't take the whole library budget, but we take those arts programs. It might be a social service organization in the community that connects the artists to the residents, to the kids in that community. So what it does not include is our commercial galleries, our architecture firms, Hollywood motion pictures, all an important part of the cultural ecology, just not part of this study. And why is that? Because when our private sector supports and invests in the arts community, that's where those dollars are typically going, the nonprofit sector. And it's an appropriate question, because those are public dollars, to ask, what's our ROI? What's the benefit that the community's getting for this decision to fund the arts? Cultural benefits, yeah, everybody gets that. But what about economic benefits? And now we can tell that story. We take a very conservative approach to this study, working with Arts Fort Worth, and they did a great job. We surveyed over 200 organizations, 74 responded. That's the data we go with. We only use data from organizations that provide it. So we don't make estimates for non-respondents. We can touch every dollar I'm about to talk about. And lastly, we've got a team of economists, and we use an IMPLAN, economic impact analysis platform. It's the same system that more than 1,000 cities and counties across the country subscribe to. So quality, reliable, conservative. So what do we find out? Here's the big drum roll. In 2022, arts and culture, a $507.1 million industry right here in Fort Worth. We have popped the $500 million mark. So that is an incredible story. Now, that number actually breaks down into two figures. On this side is spending just by those 74 responding organizations, $248.8 million. And that right there is a myth buster, right? Again, we love the arts, in our organizations, and there are these wonderful community amenities. They're businesses. We're businesses that employ people locally, that purchase goods and services from other businesses. Remember the Chamber of Commerce, and we help drive tourism. Arts organizations are good business citizens. Now, unlike most industries, the arts generate all that event-related spending. So what we have, 5.9 million attendees just at those responding organizations. That adds up to $258.2 million of spending by arts audiences. So lots of economic activity. Now, what's the economic impact of that? Well, the first thing we look at is jobs. Ask legislators their three priorities, and there's a good chance they'll tell you, jobs, jobs, and jobs. So let's just connect arts and culture to that priority. And again, right here, 7,180 jobs in Fort Worth. Little something about those jobs, by the way, arts and culture jobs are local jobs. Ours is not an industry that's going to be offshored. We're not going to be, satisfied if there's, no arts educators in the schools, no arts therapists in the hospitals. We need the performers. We need the curators hanging art. So a very local industry. And remember, not just artists either. Those are all the jobs across the community supported by our economic activity. Bottom line, arts, not just food for the soul. Putting food on the table for 7,180 households right here in the city. Another thing we look at, government revenue, $75.7 million in local, state, and federal government revenue as a result of this economic activity. Bottom line there, arts, small investment, big return. This shows us that when we fund the arts, those dollars, they're not disappearing down some black hole of goodness, right? It's giving back to the community. So some really great stories to tell there. Now, let's get down to this audience spending piece a little bit. Working with Arts Fort Worth, surveyed 917 attendees at a whole range of events. And so this is a great representative sample. The typical attendee spends $43.98 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. $43.98. And you can see how that breaks down. There's like a big chunk. That was my food. That was our lunch. And, parking is, local transportation. So you might be looking at lodging. Wow, can you still get a room for $3.80? And would you want it if you could get it? No, you wouldn't. Remember, not everyone's got a lodging cost. So I'll give you a number on that. Earlier this week, I started in Wisconsin. So we did 224,000 audience surveys nationwide. So there was a farmer in Wisconsin who paid somebody $60 to milk his cows so he could go to the theater that night. Isn't that great? People are doing what it takes to get to the arts. Now, in addition to how much did you spend, we also asked those attendees for their zip code because we want to find out, do you live in Tarrant County, which would make you local, or are you from outside the county? 24% of attendees came from outside the county. So this is why thank you for sponsoring this session, Visit Fort Worth. And do they spend differently? Absolutely. $57.10 per person, not including the cost of admission. And more on transportation, that's where you see the lodging, and a little more on food. A little bit about the lodging piece real quick. So I'm going to do one of these reduce the base things. So 24% of attendees outside the county, 12% of those folks had a lodging cost. They average $186 per person per event. So you get that head in the bed, right? That's when the cash registers, really start ringing. And that's what this data shows, that when we support the arts, we're not investing in a frill or an extra, but in an industry that draws people to the community, and those people spend money. One more thing about those non-local attendees, we asked them one more question, because we're just that annoying, which was, why are you here? We're glad you're here. Thanks for coming. But are you here on business? You here visiting friends and family? Two very common reasons we travel, right? 84% said we traveled here specifically for this arts event. Boom, there's the pulling power. Then we asked the folks who do live locally, what if this arts event wasn't taking place? Just stayed home, download it. We gave people a bunch of options. 55%, more than half said, oh, well, I'd travel to a different community to attend a similar kind of event. If people got that arts and culture itch, they're going to scratch it. And they'll scratch it right here, or they'll go somewhere else to do it. And so if you're a local merchant, a local business, you love these data. It's putting cheeks in seats and heads in beds, derrieres and cafe chairs, right? So it's good for local business. All right. I didn't flip that. There was that number. And then there is the 84% figure. All right. The great thing is, the public gets what we're talking about. It's no surprise. This is from my big national public opinion study I published a couple months ago, largest of its kind ever conducted. 86% of the American population says, yeah, the arts create more livable communities, improve quality of life. 79% say arts, good for local businesses, good for local jobs, good for the local economy. When we tell this story, people will be like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. And wow, that actually even sounds like a lower amount of money I might spend. So, this resonates with the public. But we did want to get just beyond the dollars and cents a little bit and hit some social impact findings. And these numbers are just so great here. So, you have, 83%. This arts and culture event is a pillar of our community. Mentioned earlier, 92%. This is a sort of source of pride and community identity. And a similar percentage says, if this arts or culture event or this venue were no longer here, I'd feel a sense of loss. So people are really appreciating it. And what I think turned out to be one of the most interesting numbers, which is the last one, 9 out of 10 attendees to the arts, and these are local numbers, it's important to me that this be available for future generations. And that tells me that, the arts are more than just sort of a weekend thing to do, but it's the story of our community. It's our history, it's where we've been, it's about where we are, it's about where we're going. And so a lot of heartfelt responses to this. And these numbers are a little bit higher than the national averages, just to give you some context there. So great data. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's really great. How do I fit into a $500 million local arts economy? So you go to Arts Fort Worth website, you'll find the 58-page Arts and Economic Prosperity Study report. And if you flip to page 26, you'll find the Arts and Economic Prosperity in Fort Worth calculator. And it's a way for you to gauge your organization's economic impact. You only need 2 numbers. Here's how much we spent, and actually, if you've got it, total attendance. And then you can just do this on the back of a napkin. It's all right there, stepped out. And you can then tell your economic impact story. Next time you write a proposal, a grant, we're impacting the community. We transformed a young person's life. Here's our economic impact. So you can have those numbers. We only do this study every 5 years. You're welcome. And by the way, thanks to everybody in here who participated and have made their organizations, their events available for this and did a survey. But, you can do this year's economic impact update and next year's economic impact update until we publish again in June of 28. So put that on your radar screens. Okay. So that was arts and economic prosperity. So, nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences, right? That make Everyone follow that? Because what now a lot of folks are wondering, it's like, that's great, love it, but what about the rest of it? What about the drama department here on the university? What about those architects and publishers and those commercial galleries and Hollywood motion pictures? How do they fit in the whole thing? There's actually research now that's done by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis at Department of Commerce, and it's called the Arts and Cultural Productions Satellite Account. Nationally, in 2022, arts and culture is a $1.1 trillion industry in the United States. Trillion with a T. Massive. That is 4.3% of the nation's economy. And again, this is coming from the Department of Commerce. What's great is they actually drill down and do state-level versions of this analysis. So we see here in Texas, a $59.3 billion industry, 2.5% of the state's economy. Is that a lot or a little? Well, it's bigger than education. It's bigger than agriculture. It's bigger than utilities. 383,000 jobs supported. So the next time you're advocating and championing the arts and, locally, statewide, federally, a lot of times you'll hear like, well, I love the arts, but we got to focus on business and jobs. Arts are business. Arts are jobs. So more great data that you have to work with. Now, what's fascinating is the fact that the BEA even does this research. So they focus on, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of industries in this country, but they only do a couple dozen of these satellite accounts. There's one for tourism, there's one for transportation. There has to be a real strategic, economic competitiveness interest in doing this additional kind of research. And that is, how do you prosper in a global economy? You innovate, right? We're in an innovation economy. And it's an understanding that creativity drives innovation, arts and culture drives creativity. So the numbers are impressive. The fact that they even do this research is also impressive. They're not the only ones who get it. There is a report that's done by the Conference Board. The Conference Board is the national organization for big business in this country. They give you the leading index of economic indicators, the Consumer Confidence Index. Their research, and it's called Ready to Innovate, their research, business scholars for writing for business leaders, show creativity. We're talking about creativity. Creativity is now among the top 5 applied skills that business leaders are looking for. In fact, it's leapfrog the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. Well, of course, you got to be able to read, write, and do math. But if you could take some creativity and apply that to your scientific, your engineering, your research, your coding knowledge, those are the high-paying industries and jobs we're all trying to attract and retain in our communities. 72% of business leaders in this research say creativity of high importance in hiring. 85% of that group says we can't find the people we're looking for. And there's no typing test, right, for creativity. So how do you know if you got somebody creative across the table from you? There were 2 indicators way at the top. 1, starting your own business, entrepreneurial activity. 2, study of the arts, especially while in college. And they write in the conclusion of the report, it's clear that the arts, music, drawing, drama, dance, literature, media, provide skills sought by employers of the 3rd millennium. So really, really powerful findings. And this is kind of what this might look like. So at Americans for the Arts, we used to have a big time banker as our board chair. And, at the same time he was chair of Americans for the Arts, he was also chair of the American Banking Association. So, serious banker. But he would always say, when I'm interviewing candidates, I always ask them about their level of arts involvement. Do they attend? Are they makers? That type of thing. Because for him, it led to a conversation about creativity. It was a proxy conversation for him about creativity. Oh, then he'd always say, except for my bank tellers. I don't want creative bank tellers, but everybody else. So this is one of the big things that we're all trying to do now in economic development and tourism development. We're trying to attract people to visit our communities because the fact is, when people visit nowadays, they're also asking themselves, could I live here? Could I work here? And it's an international phenomenon, right? HR associations everywhere will just tell us, how do we get those creative workers? And those creative workers are telling us, look, I'm not just creative in the workplace. I'm a creative person. I want arts and culture in my community. I want maker spaces. I want my kids to have arts education. And so this is just a whole nother benefit we're getting with this creative, culturally vibrant community that we're creating, that we're making. And that leads us, of course, to the importance of arts education. And I got to tell you, arts education, that was the first time arts saved my life. When I was a kid, I was not a very good student. I can confess that, I guess, now, but it seems a little weird. Wait, the research guy? But whatever was going on outside the window for me growing up, that was the most interesting thing that day. But it was the arts and theater that just kept me interested, kept me coming back, kept me engaged. And now there's research that shows and demonstrates these benefits. Students with an education rich in the arts are performing better academically, better grades, better test scores, lower dropout rates, and those are findings that cut across all socioeconomic strata. Every student stands to benefit from an arts education. And again, 9 out of 10 Americans say it's important for every student to receive a quality arts education. And 4 out of 5 of them say, even those without kids, yeah, this is improving the quality of education. And we're all trying to find something to agree on these days. Hey, arts education, 9 out of 10 Republicans, 9 out of 10 Democrats, 9 out of 10 independents. Yay, let's celebrate that. We found a node here. And then this is, what this looks like in action. So this happy-looking fella, Thomas Sudoff, a few years back, got the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And, all the reporters were calling, and, one of them asked, Professor, who was your most influential teacher growing up? And I'm sure they all thought he was going to say, oh, I'll never forget high school biology, But without missing a beat, he said, I owe it all to my bassoon teacher. And he went on to explain how it was his music and arts education that gave him the habits of mind that made him a great scientist. Pattern recognition, perseverance, and stick-to-itiveness, ability to deal with ambiguity and multiple solutions. There's other research that suggests this isn't an isolated case. There's a Michigan State University researcher named Robert Root-Bernstein, who studied creativity his whole career. He's a MacArthur Genius Award winner. Fascinating articles, academic, popular magazines and such. And one of the things he and his team did is they studied Nobel laureates in the sciences, going all the way back to the beginning, and looked at their level of arts involvement compared to scientists in the US and then in the UK at 2 scientific societies. The Nobel laureates, 17 times more likely to be involved as arts maker, as musician, as painter. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Something's going on there, right? So, and then I wanted one more area. We had such a great set of sessions over here. I want to talk about arts and healthcare. And so I've got an arts background. I also have a medical research background. I worked at Stanford University. I worked at Scripps Clinic and Research Foundation in La Jolla, and the arts people wondered what I was doing in the sciences, and the science people wondered what I was doing in the arts. I can tell you it's the same process of exploration, right? What if? When I worked at Scripps, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, we used to have live chamber music in the lobby. And, it was a beautiful space. They turned the fountain down, and patients would walk in or be wheeled in, bring their families. Medical staff was allowed to participate and attend. It was amazing. Four musicians just transformed the space, right? But what we would start to see is that patients that we were with clinically in their rooms, lethargic, depressed, even if you have a view of the ocean, and everybody there did, nobody wants to be in the hospital, right? But you could see physical transformation in these patients. Their eyes got less cloudy. Their posture got better. And you could just sort of sense a greater awareness of the environment around them. And we all noticed this. It was like they were getting an IV drip of the arts, and now over time, there's this growing body of research that shows when the arts are part of our healing, we have shorter hospital stays, fewer doctor visits, less medication, less depression. And lest we even think this is something new, the god Apollo was the god of both music and healing. Talk about a big portfolio, right? That guy had it. And, so we're just rediscovering once again the power of the arts. And I'll just say, the second time the arts saved my life is related to this. A few years back, I had open heart surgery. The guy who was mostly vegetarian and playing soccer twice a week, onto the table. And it's a hell of a surgery, I'll just tell you that. But when, there were just several things that just kind of brought me to my lowest. I was only in the hospital for 3 nights. I mean, it's amazing, and it saved my life. But the little thing where you go up the steps and then there's the platform and you go down the steps. Me, who played soccer literally days before, couldn't manage the first step, and I couldn't roll over to buzz the nurse in the middle of the night, because I couldn't reach the buzzer. And I was like, heck, I'm in trouble here. And so I thought, all right, I just got to walk around, and I put on a couple gowns so nobody could see me from the back. And I had my chest tubes in this hand and my telemetry device in that hand. And I just got to walk. I just got to walk the hallways here. And I passed some art on the wall. I could see it clear as day right now. And it drew me in. And there was the texture of it and the colors, and I could not stop looking at it. And I could feel the healing hand of the artist come touch me palpably. Here I'd been a guy talking about the importance of arts in healthcare literally for decades. And that was a profound, unexpected, transformative moment for me. And that gave me hope. That was my bounce spot. And I'm so grateful. I don't know who the artist was. I wish I did. If you're an artist here, thank you. If you're working arts and healthcare, thank you. That's the best I can do is just thank all of you for that work. And so I'm so grateful, and it drives me every day. So this is the real deal. This stuff really works. So let me move on here because obviously, you can see I'm just starting to pull issues right off of the front page, right, and connect it to our lives, right? Arts and jobs, arts and the economy, arts and education, arts and health. These are the things on people's minds. What else is on our mind? The fragmentation of our communities. Back to the public opinion study. Look at this. 72% of the American public says the arts create opportunities for shared experiences with people of different age, race, faith, ethnicities. 63%, almost 2/3 of the American population, the arts help me understand other cultures in my community. The arts are also bringing us together, and so that's a powerful story we have to tell as well. So let me start to wrap up here with this picture from Paris in 1913 at the Louvre. Bad news, the Mona Lisa got stolen, and it took them 2 years to get it back. And these are the hooks where the Mona Lisa had been hanging. And interestingly, in the 2 years that the Mona Lisa was missing, more people went to see where the painting had been hanging than, you know where this is going, than saw the painting itself in the previous 14 years. It's so easy to take arts and culture for granted, to take our work for granted, that the public funding and the private funding will be there, that artists will always be part of our community. We've been hearing a lot about advocacy today, and here's a little bit about how to do that. We've got a job to do. We've got to build the habit of advocacy. And a lot of people think like, well, I like the arts, but I'm not an activist. You don't have to be an activist to be active. It's just small, regular actions to be an advocate and a champion for the arts. So, we can go to the college library here, and there's a whole section on advocacy and lobbying. But let me just break it down to 3 quick and easy questions for you. What's the message? Who gets the message? And who delivers the message? First question, what's the message? Well, we just did a whole bunch of them, right? Jobs, the economy, health, mental health, on down the line. We got to talk about the arts in as many ways as possible and how they build healthier communities. Second question is, who gets the message? And that's where we have to do a little bit of our own research, right? Who are those decision makers? Who are those authorizers in our environment? It might be a legislative committee. It might be the city council and the mayor. It might be trustees of a foundation. Who are those people, and what do they care about? And I'll tell you, one of the great things about the pandemic, it's okay to talk about mental health now, So we've got leaders who are like, I'm the mental health leader, that's what I care about, or education, or the economy. Lead with that, but be ready to talk about all of it. And then the third question, and some days I think this is just the most important one, who delivers the message? So, they bring me up to the Capitol, a lot of times to do briefings with the members and their staff, but they see me coming a mile away, right? Guys cover up their wallets, ladies lock their purse in a drawer. They know what I'm after. But if I can bring a hospital CEO, a school superintendent, a military officer, an artist, a business leader, it totally changes the conversation. We had a session a few years back with the mayor of Mesa, Arizona. And he was telling a story of how it was budget hearing night for the arts. And so there was the mayor and the city council, and 60 people lined up to do their 3 minutes. And he said, so we were ready for that. We knew it. But I noticed that the chief of police was there that evening, which on itself wasn't that unusual for a city council meeting, right? But he said he was in full chief of police regalia. Hat, tie, medals. He said that was a little different. After everybody else had done their 3 minutes, the chief of police asked for 3 minutes and said, if you got to take a cut out of the arts budget, I'd rather you just took that out of my public safety budget. Because when they do their job well, it makes my job easier. That's right. Amen to that. Can you imagine if we had 1,000 police chiefs on that message? Problem solved, right? So, who delivers the message? And so that's up to us. That's up to us mobilizing our friends and neighbors. We have, Fiona here and a number of people from Texans for the Arts. You heard the mayor connect with Arts Fort Worth. So, that's your local advocacy. That's your state advocacy. Go to artsactionfund.com. It's free. It's our organization. It's the political arm. We're at about 500,000 individuals as part of that army, to advocate for the arts. And so you can be part of that too. And it's fun. If you haven't advocated, if you haven't sort of marched down the marble halls before, it'll feel a little intimidating the first time. But they're so glad to see you. Build that relationship. Be relentless in your messaging, and don't let your first visit be your last visit. Because everything you do to advance the arts is important. You're important for doing it. Thanks very much. Thank you.